giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Happy Monday night and welcome into On the Beat. Cody Chaffins and Mike Griffith coming to you from Athens. We're just outside the football facility here, and just another ho-hum week, huh, Mike?
Yeah, just another ho-hum week as Georgia puts their season on the line on Rocky Top. An 8-game win streak. They're trying to match the longest streak ever. Kirby's never lost in the stadium as a football coach, never won there as a player.
Right.
I guarantee you that's what
he ain't forgot that.
That's what he remembers, yeah.
All right, so we got a lot to get to today. We're going to talk about Georgia and this offense. We're going to talk about Tennessee and their offense, which has looked incredible. We also have our boots on the ground coming up on the show, some of the stuff I caught at Austin Peay that you're going to want to check out. We'll also have Mike's 30,000-foot view. We can check on those poor folks down in Gainesville, Florida this week. It's been a rough one for them. But before we start, Mike, I want to tell you this story. So I'm sitting in Kirby Smart's press conference. I get a text. It is a buddy of mine, a Georgia buddy named Billy, lives out in Colorado, one of my brother's best friends growing up, and he says, "Oh no, I can't wait to hear what Mike says about this week. You guys were feeling down on the Dogs last week after the win on Marshall. Everybody said we were being negative Nancy, and now I think the whole world is, kind of caught up to how we felt a week ago."
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of the things we talked about came to fruition. I mean, they didn't have a play longer than 23 yards in this game. It was a run play. The longest pass play was 19 yards. They struggled in short yardage at the goal line. Now, I will point out that Chauncey Bones was effective in a lot of other third and threes or shorter. So they did work on that. It was just that goal line debacle at the end of the first half that kind of left a lasting impression. And then, the Austin Peay coach, singing the praises. I love our guys. We fought. And he said it. We're down 21-6. We got a chance to be down a score in the fourth quarter in Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
That is a win, ladies and gentlemen, for an FCS team.
I thought about that at halftime. I said the Austin Peay coach, he'd be happy to pack this up. That felt like a win for them at the end of that first half.
And he's a star coach. I mean, this guy is a star on the rise that was a part of David Cutcliffe's, and he coached under Chip Kelly. So this guy was a very good coach. He knew exactly what Georgia was willing to show, what they would do. He knew Kirby wasn't going to throw a blitz package at him. He knew he wasn't going to give up anything long. So that coach played it about as well as you can play it. And the Austin Peay kids got the opportunity to play the game of their life in a tremendous stadium against a two-time champion. They were fired up, and let's face it, Cody, that stadium was darn near empty after the rain delay. So kind of is what it is.
Yeah, so when you look at this, last week we kind of talked about all the factors we were worried about, whether it was the offensive line or Gunner not throwing downfield. What stuck out to you about this one besides we talked about the goal line fail?
Yeah, I mean, the short yardage was an issue. I felt like there seemed to be a concerted effort to set up more shot plays. And I don't know if it's Gunner not seeing him or if it's Gunner just saying, hey, check down. Don't get my team beat. Because while we talk about lack of explosive plays, let me tell you what else we're talking about. No interceptions from Gunner Stockton through 2 games. And he has not been sacked yet. Now, when you go on the road at Neyland Stadium and it gets really loud there, you don't want to be in 3rd and 12 or 2nd and 15. So I think Kirby Smart understands you don't want to put any quarterback in a position where they're playing behind the chains. And this is why he's so stubborn and insistent on getting that run game going and staying on schedule. Because it's when you get behind the chains and the whole stadium knows it's 3rd and 15 and there's 105,000 people roaring and that left tackle doesn't hear the call. But the defender responds to the ball being snapped, and your quarterback and it's a strip, and now the momentum's changed. These are the plays that get you beat. And Kirby Smart is saying first and foremost, hey, we're not going to beat ourselves. That is a trademark of Georgia football teams. And to this point, Gunner Stockton has made sure that Georgia has not been in a position to beat itself offensively.
Yeah, I felt like that, coming into this week, it feels like this is what I want Gunner Stockton to be. Keep the train on the tracks kind of quarterback. Now, did I want that in the first 2 weeks when we spent all summer talking about it's going to be great to have these first 2 weeks where Georgia can kind of, flex their muscle a little bit, figure out who they are and all those things. But we haven't seen that at all. So now if the rubber meets the road and you got to play from behind and you got to start taking shots, do you feel good about it? Because we hadn't seen them do it yet.
Well, let's hope they can play from behind because the odds say Tennessee will lead. They've actually scored in the last 5 years. Yeah. Amazingly. And I think Georgia has flexed the muscle, and their names are Zachariah Branch and and Dwight Phillips. That's the muscle. Phillips has been explosive running the football. I think that's a pleasant surprise. I don't think anybody expected him to have this much of an immediate impact. And I think Branch has shown you what he can do after the catch. And, pretty telling answer today, Cody, when I asked Kirby about no tight ends catching the passes in this last game, and the last time that happened was 2021 Arkansas. And Kirby said, oh, no, there were times when the tight end was supposed to be the first target, and maybe Gunner didn't make the read, or maybe the guy wasn't open, or maybe something happened where the play had to change. But Kirby also said that explosive plays go to those who can break tackles. He keeps bringing up the fact that these tight ends are not breaking tackles.
Second time he's done that. He did that in the preseason. They said, how many tight ends are we going to see? And he said, you got to break tackles there. And he said it again. And we've seen guys like Zachariah Branch. He can break tackles and make something happen out of nothing.
Cash Jones, Dwight Phillips. I think we're going to see more balls go to Noah Thomas. I think he's going to make some plays. They're going to try and get the ball to him. But to me, those are the proven playmakers. And those are the guys now that I think that Gunner Stockton's going to lean on when he goes to Knoxville. I don't expect worrying about getting the ball to 10 different receivers or 8 different running backs. It's time to pare it down and say, okay, you've had 2 practice games. Who are you going to go try to win with under pressure now? It started out as a 7-point line. It's already down to like 3.5, maybe down lower by tonight comes. Those Tennessee people are throwing money down on the Vols.
Yeah, nobody feeling great about Georgia at this point. When we talk about Georgia and Austin Peay, and Gunner Stockton with kind of happy feet and ready to move, and he had people coming after him. Yeah. My question is, if he's had happy feet in a half-empty stadium against a team like Austin Peay, what's it going to be like when he is facing this defensive line from Tennessee coming after him?
Yeah, a lot more decisive, and you'll probably see some of those shorter runs. Maybe he throws the ball away on occasion. So far, instead of throwing the ball away, he's tried to make a little bit of yardage with his feet. You saw how quickly Austin Peay adapted to that, though. And if you're not breaking runs on Austin Peay, they had one game of film. They watched Marshall, which, by the way, lost to Missouri State at home last week. They had one game film to study, and they said, okay, we got to have a plan for this quarterback running the ball. And so Gunner Stockton got taken away, much like he did against Notre Dame. But, Cody, to me, that means something else has got to be there. I mean, if you're using a defender to account for the quarterback, that's simple math. I mean, somebody else has got to be open, or that's one less guy that can play in support. Now, Kirby Smart did say they were playing zone coverage. Now, I don't know how good of a zone team Tennessee is in terms of how well their defensive backs play, and Kirby also said that explosive plays were finding the soft spot in that zone. So Kirby made sure he laid out a lot of reasons why the explosive plays haven't been there yet. A lack of broken tackles, a lack of pass protection, Gunner not feeling confident enough throwing the ball from within the pocket. And today he said that this was a catch-all. If all 11 guys are doing their job, the play works. Well, Coach, we know that. I think any play works if all 11 guys are.
That when they're drawn up on the chalkboard, yeah, they all are supposed to work. The other reason that he is given for not seeing the explosive plays, he said we got to take what they're giving to us. And he said Marshall and Austin Peay were playing pretty far off the ball, and if that means they're going to give us 8 yards right off the bat just to throw it out on the outside, we're going to take 8 yards every time. Right. But he said you're not going to see that in the SEC. Do you feel that same way where these guys are going to get up and press you, and for that reason, maybe you can try it a little deep?
Yeah, because they don't want their defense to be on the field the whole time. And if Georgia's moving the ball, that means they're flipping field field position, even if they don't score. If you take the ball from your 20 to midfield and then you punt and the other team starts inside their 10, with this defense that Georgia has, Kirby Smart feels pretty good about that. So these teams are going to want to force 3-and-outs. They're going to want to get their offense on the field. The best way to stop Josh Heupel's offense is to keep it off the field, right? Now, Tennessee has used tempo effectively against other teams. They've won 2 of their last 3 against Florida and Alabama, running this tempo offense. But I've said this, Cody, and Kirby doesn't get credit for this. Tennessee might have the best hurry-up offense in the country. But I think Kirby Smart might have the best hurry-up defense. Those guys sub quickly. Glenn Schumann has a plan. And so far, this Tennessee offense, which spreads the field and uses tempo, they have not been able to out-scheme or X&O Kirby Smart, and not out-personnel for that matter either.
Yeah, when it comes to Georgia's offense, we'll touch more on Tennessee in just a minute. When it comes to Georgia, a lot of the fans it's quick and easy to write those 4 little letters, B-O-B-O. That's the issue with the whole. But to me, how serious I'll ask you, because I'll tell you what I feel. Georgia took this Austin Peay game not super serious. Yeah. A reason they moved up kickoff by an hour. You're not doing that in a game that you're not treating more like a G-Day. And even Kirby Smart talking about the offensive line, he talked about playing so many guys. It almost sounded like he was doing auditions. Like they weren't. They knew they were going to win the game. Sure, let's try him out there. Let's see what happens when we do this or that. That means they're not taking that game super seriously. So I don't think it's a play call thing by any means. It's not Mike Bobo. I think it's just Georgia. They're using these games for a whole different reason than trying to put stats together.
Not taking the score seriously.
Yes, they're taking the game very seriously.
Taking the opportunities to get players snaps. So when that kid comes in the office and says, Coach, I may have an opportunity to go play somewhere else. Kirby Smart's had a chance to watch him play and say, all right, there's the door. He gave you those snaps in the first 2 games. He didn't look real good. He's got to be able to assess his talent, and there is something to be said for how guys play on Saturdays. Now, Kirby will tell you, I watch him in practice, and this is a great – we know there's gamers. There's certain players that rise up to the occasion, and there's certain players that are going to make the most of those opportunities on game day Saturdays. There is something to be said for that. And then there's certain players who look really good in practice that can't take it to the game day Saturday. And Kirby Smart, in fact, said that's one of the things with Gunner Stockton is he looks good throwing the ball down the field in practice. He said he does it all the time, and he just needs him to transfer it to the game. Now, if you're Gunner Stockton, you're thinking to yourself, as long as I don't turn the ball over, I'm completing a high percentage of passes.
Right.
I'm doing my job. Gunner Stockton doesn't want to lose his job throwing some pick six over the middle against Austin Peay. So until the coach says, hey, you need to let it rip or we're going in another direction, they're not going to turn it loose, and they're not going to take any unnecessary chances. And that's the nature of this offense. So getting back to the Mike Bobo question, okay? I look at Mike Bobo as the driver of this vehicle. All right, he's the guy that you're putting behind the steering wheel. He'll decide when to put the pedal to the gas. He'll decide when to downshift. You got him driving a pickup truck. You don't got him driving a race car. You're not asking him to go up and down the field with a 2-man offense. You're saying, hey, give me an offense that can run the ball effectively, that can set up play action shot plays, that's not going to turn the ball over, that's not going to have negative plays. Go. That is the constraints that he wants Mike Bobo working in. So yes, we can say Mike Bobo didn't call this play or that play, but we have to look at the personnel he's been given and what the head coach wants out of this offense, and what they decide together is the best use of this personnel. And with Gunner Stockton at quarterback and an offensive line that has 4 new starters and a lot of new receivers, you're not going to come out of the gates trying to win the game throwing the ball 40 times. And when you got a great defense, that also changes how you call offense. Because you say, look, these guys ain't going to drive nobody's going to make a living driving the ball 80 yards on Georgia this year. So that's the complementary football part of it. So it's not as simple as Bobo. It's not as simple as Gunner. It's the whole thing in the totality of it all. As Kirby Smart would say, totality.
So Tennessee did make it look easy, right? They went up and they scored. It was a program record, 72 points, as they beat their FCS opponent by a ton of points and made it, went up and down the field. Do you feel like this is a different, Joey Aguilar versus we saw Nico last year? Is this a different Tennessee team than those Tennessee teams we saw come in here a couple years ago too?
Well, I do think it's interesting that Heupel felt good enough about Joey Aguilar that he sat him at halftime. I've seen enough from the new quarterback. He didn't go through spring drills. He's only played 2 games, but I'm taking him out at halftime. It's like, okay, that's a lot of confidence in this guy. Or maybe you want it to end on a positive note. 48 points through the first, 30 minutes. Maybe you don't want to risk the injury to the guy. But I thought that was an awful early hook for a quarterback so new to the program. But look, Tennessee feels good about themselves. They beat Syracuse. Now, I don't really know how good this Fran Brown Syracuse team is. They lost a lot of guys in the portal, and I really don't know much about East Tennessee State or how those teams were playing them. But we know this: when Tennessee gets teams down, Josh Heupel likes to run the score up. He's a former quarterback, and he thinks like a quarterback, and he thinks offensive. It's kind of like Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin scored a lot of points this year. Austin Simmons has thrown a lot. He's also thrown 4 interceptions through 2 games. But he's an offensive-minded coach. He's a quarterback. He says, that's good. That's adversity that he can learn from. I want my quarterback to learn to overcome interceptions. I want the, no pun intended, Gunner mentality. Kirby Smart, hey, we don't want turnovers. Gunner's doing everything we're asking him to do. We need those other guys to do their job. We need the linemen to pass protect long enough. We need those receivers to get open. We need guys to break tackles. Different mentality from a former All-SEC safety than a former quarterback. So it's a classic offensive-defensive match. Heupel, the former Oklahoma National Championship quarterback, Kirby Smart, the former All-SEC safety.
All right, so how you feeling? Can Georgia go up there and hang with them?
You know, I think they can, because I feel like Georgia's defense is going to create the sort of adversity that Tennessee hasn't seen yet. And then the question becomes, how well does Georgia move the ball? Because we have seen them have some issues with the run game, albeit they've tried a lot of different guys. But I kind of think they have this sorted out here between Frazier and Phillips and Bones in short yardage. We know what Cash Jones can do. We know that Branch is a pretty good option who's going to get open quick and can make some people miss after the catch. Haven't really seen a lot of the fade and downfield stuff to Noah Thomas and Colby, but they don't want you to see that. Right? They're not going to force that issue against 3 deep, and they really don't want Tennessee to see what their route trees look like with these guys. So Kirby Smart has shown what he's comfortable showing. The offensive line needs to click into gear. Ernest Green and Juan Gaston did not play. I do feel like they're going to be back.
Yeah, we saw a video of Juan Gaston pregame, walked in, not in the boot, not the tightrope boot, which we've become used to seeing with Tate Ratledge, Amarius Mims.
But you still got to do it, Cody. Yeah. You still got to go in front of 100,000. It's still Gunner Stockton's first true road start. We do know the history of Tennessee scoring early. Gunner did bring Georgia back from behind against Texas. That opening drive of the third quarter was beautiful. Now Texas didn't know much about him, and they had to adjust. So it wasn't like, they had a game plan going in for Gunner Stockton's mobility. Tennessee's going to have a plan. But I know enough about Kirby Smart to know this. He self-scouts. A lot of the stuff that you've seen Mike Bobo run is stuff they're putting on tape for Tennessee to react to. They're going to show that same formation against Tennessee, and they're going to run a completely different play. And Tennessee knows that. They know that they can't read too much into what they've seen. Because, like you said, those first 2 games, Kirby wasn't taking the score serious. He wasn't trying to score as many points as he could.
And that's what I meant by serious,
yeah. Yeah, they're setting things up. They're building tendencies just so they can break tendency against Tennessee. And I know that Josh Heupel said one of the things he said in his press conference today was, they asked him, well, what about this game being moved up? And he said, yeah, there's not as much stuff on film as in I really don't know what they're going to do with Chris Cole and Williams and C.J. Allen and I really don't know what pressure packages and this LO guy I really don't know what Georgia's going to do up front.
That's the one thing we have not – we've done 2 shows, right, talking about what's wrong with Georgia the last 2 weeks. We hadn't touched much on the defense at all, and that's because there's no problem there, right?
Yeah, a couple young cornerbacks have gotten burnt and not fared well the first couple games, but other than that, no, the front line looks awesome. The linebackers are deep. The cornerbacks are outstanding. Ellis Robinson actually graded out highest above Dalen Everett, who's about as much a veteran presence as you can have. And, oh, by the way, you got Daniel Harris with his NFL body and ability. So you got 3 great corners. You've done a lot at safety. I'm still a little curious about the position next to K.J. Bolden when push comes to shove. Who's out there, because we have seen some struggles from the UAB transfer Maddox. And now this is PFF grading, okay? Kirby might have a whole different grading system. But as PFF shows, these safeties outside opposite of Bolden have not graded out real high. Zion Branch and Adrian Maddox. So you wonder who's going to be the safety next to KJ. How much 2 deep, 3 deep? What's Kirby going to play? How dangerous are these Tennessee receivers? How good is their offensive line? Can Joey Aguilar take a hit? He is going to get hit. He will get hit.
Yeah, whether it's a cornerback. I think of Dalen Everett coming on the cornerback blitz last year at Texas as one of those moments. They will find a way to get to him, so it's going to be fun there. All right, we're going to still talk a little more about Georgia and some of the things I saw from the sidelines and get Mike's reaction to that coming up. We'll also let Mike weigh in on what's going on around the SEC. And then plus, Mike spent a long time up there in Neyland Stadium. What's that Neyland effect? We'll talk about that. It's all still to come. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingles.
And it's the first title in team history. Here it is. And lightning strikes twice. Back-to-back championships. 3 in a row. They've done it again.
Where did those cheese come from? Relax. They're from Ingles.
Can I eat this now?
So Mike and I are on the ground today just outside the football headquarters here. And we're pre-practice, so we're not picking up any news or tips for you. I'm sure with this week being this week, Kirby Smart will be echoing to Watkinsville and back as he gets on the mic getting after his team. But talking about boots on the ground, well, I was on the sidelines on Saturday against Austin Peay. Let's share some of that stuff with you that we caught. All right, so boots on the ground this week. It was very early in the game. Nate Frazier puts the ball on the ground. It's something we talked about. It's got to get cleaned up this year. What was so interesting to me was that Kirby Smart, after Frazier fumbles the ball, he walks over to the sideline. I'll show you what we caught Kirby Smart doing. As he puts his arm around Nate Frazier, as you see Frazier fumbled the ball, walks over there. Kirby Smart puts his arm around him, and we're going to look up at that big board, and you and I are going to do film study right this minute. What went wrong there? It's something that has perturbed Kirby Smart last year. Anytime you're turning the ball over, even today, Kirby Smart brought this fumble up unprovoked. Somebody was asking about Gunner Stockton throwing an interception. He said, a turnover can happen on any play. We turned the ball over running the ball last week. It really got to him. And the way Kirby just says, look, I want you to look right now. We are doing film study this minute.
Yeah, that's coaching right there, and it's teaching a kid, hey, slow down, take a look at what you did wrong. I mean, look, we knew that Nate Frazier had some ball security issues. I believe he lost 3 fumbles last year. You can't have that. If you're going to play the style of offense, if you're going to drive the pickup truck,
right,
you can't afford to get stuck in the mud, and you turning the ball over defeats the whole purpose. You may go 2 or 3 series playing field position football just to get that optimal opportunity to get the ball back at midfield or get them pinned inside the 5 with a Brett Thorson punt. You fumble the ball, and you have just undone 6, 8, maybe 10 plays worth of field position football to put your team in a position to take advantage. So that is unacceptable. Ball security is an absolute premium, especially when it's an unforced fumble like that. Just a case of Nate trying to get the extra yard. You got to know, hey, I'm wrapped up, I'm going down. Let me get down with this rather than trying to reach out with that ball and gain another half yard when I've already got the first down.
Let's see if that's the last time we talk about that. One of the other interesting parts of talking about film study, we asked Kirby Smart, like at halftime, he went in hot, right? Because that's when they had just failed on the fourth, or it was a third down, I guess, 3rd and goal situation. They don't score down there in the red zone. He said he kind of had, once he realized that, they were going to have this extended period, he's like, we could have done 2 hours of just ripping into these guys. And he said, actually, I needed to put the brakes on a little bit and not do all of that right then. So that was an interesting, I guess, strategy for Kirby, the way that he handled halftime, because it could have been, put the tape on, we're going to go over this right now. And, we saw, speaking of Fran Brown, had his guys running sprints after they barely beat UConn. He wouldn't have to right after the game, but Kirby Smart kind of pushed it away a little bit and said, hey, let's reset.
Well, let's think about how Kirby managed Stetson Bennett. He wasn't pumping any brakes there. He was getting in the mailman's ear even when they were beating Michigan bad in the Orange Bowl. But you coach different teams and different players different ways. Remember, this is a really young team. 54% of these guys are first or second year players. They're going to make mistakes. And you saw Kirby kind of the way he said, well, it's kind of warm out there, kind of some sloppy football. And I'm thinking, I don't normally hear him use weather as a reason why. Well, we got a lot of new offensive linemen in there playing different. And then he said, and it created a little adversity. Which
he wanted
good.
that, it sounded
it's like. You know what? Yeah, let them guys chew on. Let them hear from their moms and dads and friends and classmates about not being able to score from the 1-yard line 5 plays against the net. Let these guys live in that moment a little bit that you couldn't score on FCS Austin. So, guys, that's why you're going to listen and practice today. Don't think that series won't be coming up over that microphone during the course of this week when Kirby Smart gets his Bulldogs fired up, saying, hey, there's going to be a lot better team across the line of scrimmage from you, and they're not going to give you 5 plays to score from the 1. So focus on the execution. Everybody needs to dial it up.
A couple of one-on-one battles, that will be brought up time and again. All right, second thing we caught for boots on the ground. I just wanted to show you this just to prove what existed. I can tell you that Lawson Lucky was, in fact, at the ball game Saturday. Now, if you looked at the box score, you wouldn't know that because neither he nor Oscar Delp nor Jaden Riddell nor Elias Williams, and God bless Ethan Barbour for what happened to him, but none of those guys showed up in the box score. No tight end with the catch. You mentioned it, first time since Arkansas 2021.
Yeah, shocking, especially because we've talked so much in the offseason about, well, this might be the best tight ends room in the country.
Right.
The least impressed guy so far has been Kirby Smart, though. And he has let us know that. When I brought up the tight ends having a good scrimmage, he took offense to that. He said, I didn't see anybody. Well, you're supposed to catch the ball when you're wide open. He said, I didn't see anybody do anything. He said, I didn't see a tight end break a tackle out there today. And he brought up the broken tackle thing again today when I asked about no tight ends catching the ball. And he said, that's a key to the explosive plays. You got to put guys out there that break tackles. So I think he's sending a message loud and clear to Lawson Lucky the next time he catches a pass that he expects to get maximum yards after the catch. I will say that Oscar Delp has been grading out very high in the blocking, and he's shown marked improvement from a year ago in that category.
Yeah, those guys are definitely getting that part of their job done for sure, and we're open sometimes. Didn't get the ball this past week. The other thing I think about, and maybe it's a long time ago, I think of the Hobnail Boot game. You think of the tight ends in that game, Randy McMichael, Ben Watson leading the Dogs down on that final drive. But even just last year, Oscar Delp, 2 touchdowns against Tennessee. Some about Tennessee brings out the best in Georgia tight ends.
Yeah, it seems to, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of it is how the defense plays you and what they're willing to give up. And maybe this is more Kirby Smart rope-a-dope. Tennessee going, hey, they're not really throwing to the tight ends much this year. Let's not worry about putting that safety on Delp or Lucky when they release from the line, right? Yeah. That's why I said a lot of tendencies are being built right now just to be undone, and it really is three-dimensional chess with Kirby Smart and Josh Heupel when you put a former SEC safety up against former national championship Oklahoma quarterback. I mean, these guys are playing the games at different levels. I can tell you from going up to Knoxville in the past few years, Josh Heupel wasn't real thrilled to see a Georgia reporter in the audience asking him questions. He didn't like that. He thought we were sticking it to him when really we're just trying to get his perspective on the game, and there's not that he really wants to say. He's done a lot there, Cody.
Yeah,
but he hadn't beat Georgia.
Done about everything. What did I see? He hadn't lost a home game since 22. I think he's beaten Alabama now a couple years, and so he's done it all except take down the Dogs.
It's the last step for Josh Heupel to completely win over the Vol Nation.
All right, so if we went negative on boots on the ground, talking about Nate Frazier's fumble, and we talk about the tight ends not getting – I do want to have a kind of a cool story for the end of this. It was on this 99-yard drive that Georgia drove right down the field on Austin Peay. I look in, I say, well, who is that in there together? Dontrell Glover, true freshman, number 63, next to Bo Hughley, number 55. These two guys were high school teammates at Langston Hughes in Atlanta, won a state title, GHSA title there. But how cool that both of those guys ended up there in the game at the same time, a freshman and now a third-year guy in Hughley. So really cool moment for the Langston Hughes Panthers right there. And Dontrell Glover got glowing reviews from Kirby Smart after this game.
Graded out highest among the offensive linemen on PFF. I mean, you might see more of this kid in the game. And, Juan Gaston, for all his size and power, didn't have a great pass blocking grade early on, so depending on the situation, I think young Glover has proven up for the task, and I think that he's probably earned a spot and become one of those guys Kirby Smart feels he can win with. Remember at the beginning of the year he said I only have, did he say 6 or 7 offensive linemen playing winning football? I think you can add Glover to the mix after he represented himself well in that game against Austin.
Yeah, he said he's very instinctual, and it's one of those things that has got to happen now because you're in this era where you just don't have the depth that you used to have. You got to find freshmen who can come in and contribute. And the offensive line is probably the hardest spot to find that, to find 2 of them in a year now. You've seen Gaston out there, and to see Dontrell Glover getting out there and proving he can play winning football, that's going to be key in this new era.
Yeah, I mean, it's the time to come together is now, right? I mean, it's not just Tennessee. It's Tennessee bye week, Alabama. And we'll get to this in a second, but Bama just put up over 70 points. So, things might be fine in Tuscaloosa now. So the SEC season has arrived. I mean, we're beginning the stretch. What we've seen so far, it's just been practice games. We got to remember that.
Right.
And Kirby doesn't care about the score, but the things that he's worked on need to come to fruition, and this is the week that they put it together behind us on that practice field.
All right, we talked about what's going on here at Georgia. We're going to go high now. Mike's 30,000-foot view to get all of what's going on in the SEC. All right, Mike, the 2 big stories in the SEC this week. Everybody's talking about Oklahoma and what happened at Florida.
Yeah, well, it's just started at Florida. Billy Napier, I thought, had one of the best midseason coaching turnarounds that I'd ever seen.
Right.
He was dead man walking. Calls were being made. And the Gators finished the season by winning 4 games. Their defense rises to the occasion. They start this year with a 55-0 win. They're everybody's upset pick to make the playoff. They lose one game 18-16 to South Florida at the Swamp, and now all the buyout numbers are being reported, all the goodwill that was generated. And here's why. And I got to look at my phone for this because it's not just one next tough game.
No,
Cody.
it's 4.
They got to play at LSU under the lights in Tiger Stadium next on the 13th. Then they got to play at Miami against Carson Beck.
Right.
Then they have to play Texas at home. Then they travel to play Texas A&M on the road. And then they get a
Mississippi
home
State.
Yeah,
Mississippi State.
Just beat the number 12 team in the nation with their quarterback. Oh, and then they get a bye week, and then they got to play Georgia in Jacksonville. The season's not over. At Kentucky, played Ole Miss within a touchdown. Then they got to play home against. Then they got to play at Ole Miss, and then home against Tennessee, and then home against FSU. How many more wins do you see there? What's realistic? What games do you see wins?
Probably 2 or 3.
Kentucky, Mississippi State, and
maybe if you catch FSU or, because it's a rivalry game.
Maybe.
But, yeah, I mean, it ain't easy.
And if you're under 500, if you're Billy Napier, are you gone? And think about this. Scott Strickland just signed a new contract. So he's not tied to Billy Napier
Because it seemed
anymore.
like they were going to be tied together because it's Strickland's couple hires in a row now.
The athletic director, right? So now where's he at? And we know that he dances to the music that he hears from that money, that ka-ching, the boosters that are saying, all right, look, we're not going to keep throwing money at this program if we don't have confidence in this head football coach. So Billy Napier is going to need another turnaround. And losing to South Florida, now South Florida did beat Boise State at home, but I think it was the way they lost, Cody. They had a player that spit on the opposing player, and this is just a couple days after we saw this in the NFL. I mean, that's a lack of discipline. That's a thing that comes back to haunt a coach because you say to yourself, that's not the kind of team culture. That's a disciplined type of play. You guys beat yourself. That was an unnecessary. There was a pass interference. That can't be controlled. But when a player loses their poise like that, that never reflects well on a head coach.
I think down to right down the street from Foley Field, and they pull out the relief pitcher. They say, keep him in. All the fans saying, I think Dog fans want to leave Billy there. He's doing just fine.
Oh, gosh, that's so harsh. But there is a lot of talent there, and I'm not sure if I believe DJ Lagway's really all the way back healthy.
Right.
I mean, he's been trying to play through some things. He had a calf injury. We know he had an injury that affected his throwing motion. Things just not coming together for the Florida game. At this point, things can change fast in the SEC.
Right. Well, Brent Venables was on the hot seat last year. We thought he might be on his way out. Then John Mateer comes to town. They knock off Michigan on national TV Saturday night.
Yeah, another team with a really tough schedule, though.
Right.
I mean, you take a look at Oklahoma's schedule, and they got to get some stuff done. They're going to need to fare well against Texas. And a lot of these battles get fought among the donors and the money that's going into the programs. I mean, I have people telling me, hey, Missouri's getting guys that Oklahoma used to get. And when Eli Drinkwitz was on the SEC Network last week, he talked about all the Fortune 500 companies in that state. He talked about the major metropolitan areas of Kansas City and St. Louis that serve the school. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, my gosh, Missouri really might have the means to put these NIL deals together and get this sort of payroll that they need to compete. So he's very comfortable with where Missouri's at financially. Conversely, Oklahoma, they come into the SEC, and I don't think they got the schedule Texas did. I kind of feel like Texas might have got a little better scheduling there coming into the league, Cody.
Yeah, it's so interesting to watch what Oklahoma does. You talked about Mississippi State. Does this change your thoughts on a trip to Starkville in a few weeks?
I don't think it's ever easy to go to Starkville for any team. And, covering this league for a long time, I used to see Alabama go over there back in the 90s. And those Mississippi State teams weren't always the most celebrated, but the teams knew they'd been for a physical battle, and it was a tough trip. Starkville's a tough place to get to. As Dog fans know that travel, there's a very small airport near there. If you try to fly into Memphis, it's a 3-hour drive. If you try to drive directly, you got to drive through Tuscaloosa. By the way, they play LSU that day, so good luck with the traffic if you're trying to make that drive. It's a tough place. It's a smaller stadium. The cowbells make it a little bit unique. And the Mississippi State teams are typically playing with some pride. And you think back, and even last year, Mississippi State quarterback threw for over 300 yards. They only lost by 10 between the hedges after all the attrition that they had. Yeah, so Mississippi State's not a pushover. It's not a game. No games in the SEC can be overlooked, especially games on the road.
And when you have a team that is believing, like Georgia got Kentucky very early last year when they still believed. And if you get Mississippi State in a team that believes, it's a whole different team and a whole different atmosphere around a team as well. So there you go. That is Mike's 30,000-foot view as we look around the SEC. We're going to be up there. Are you excited to be on the riverboat this week? I didn't get to do it 2 years ago. This experience, I mean, that town's going to be crazy anyway. College game day, I think, is going up for Georgia, Tennessee, and then we're going to be floating up and down.
Yeah, I lived up there for a while, and I'd never done the riverboat until DawgNation came up with the tailgate idea, and it's a completely different perspective. And the game setting in Knoxville is beautiful. The Tennessee River is adjacent to Neyland Drive, and the stadium sits right across. There's some high banks, and you can see cliffs and a lot of acreage. It's a little early for the colors to change, but there'll still be plenty of bright colors there. I got a feeling we're going to see a lot of orange. It'll be interesting to see if the Vol Navy tries to blockade the DawgNation boat. There was some threats of that the last time we did this, but it is a unique setting, and as far as Neyland Stadium goes, it is different. It is the most vertical stadium in the SEC. I think it's the most difficult stadium that Georgia plays in on the road on a regular basis. Tiger Stadium would be comparable, but because of how vertical that stadium is, those fans are right on top of you. It's completely enclosed, and it can get really loud in there.
Yeah, it was really interesting to talk to Kirby Smart today, and I said, because he mentioned it on Saturday night when they asked him about Tennessee. He said, when you play your first road game, period, and it's in the SEC, he said it gets that much tougher. So I said, well, does that just mean, blasting Rocky Top? Because that was that's the thing everybody does is just play music really loud. And he said, no, it's actually goes into the game planning, trying to figure out what you can and can't do specifically in a road type environment.
Well, a couple years ago, and I do think this is some gamesmanship between Kirby and Josh Heupel. I think Kirby likes to poke Josh a little bit. And he made the comment that you got to know what your kids can execute in that situation. When I don't know if you remember the number 1 versus number 1 game.
I was there.
Okay, well, there was about 5 false starts, and, and the Tennessee players were having trouble communicating. And Kirby's comment was something to the effect of, well, you got to know what you can call. You're not going to be able to, like he was telling Josh Heupel, hey, man, you can't be trying to change plays at the line of scrimmage on us in this stadium. Like, he was letting Josh know that it was his fault that he put his team in that situation. And that's why he was talking about knowing what plays you can call when you're on the road. It's the same Kirby Smart. He gives you all the answers if you listen careful. And what he's telling you is you can't go into a loud environment and beat yourself and get yourself behind the chains. That's when the catastrophic plays happen. So he's let Heupel know when Heupel came here, and he let us know that he's game planning for a loud environment, and he's going to be careful not to put his team in position where they're trying to do things that they can't execute in a hostile situation.
Yeah, and that just don't be changing play. You're not going to call a bunch of different plays at the line of scrimmage or give them 3 plays in the huddle and say,
and
try
sometimes,
and communicate to everybody.
And he said sometimes you just go to the line and you run the play even if it's the wrong play. Even if it's not the ideal play, you just get that snap off and you make sure you don't have a motion penalty that moves you back 5, or you don't try to change the play and one lineman doesn't hear it right and your quarterback gets knocked out. So a lot of times you just got to go with what you call in those situations, and that's the way you beat the noise.
Yeah, so it's going to be fun to go up there in Neyland Stadium. I feel like for a while there, it was one of those places a Georgia player was getting hurt every year. My mind always goes back to Nick Chubb and the turf there. Hopefully not the case there, but it's one of those things that you talked about. Kirby Smart, it stuck with him. Like, it sticks with him. Every year we get the Georgia Tech game and we ask the players, what does this mean to coach? Well, he lost to them and it stuck with him. He was one of those teams, Tennessee, that he never beat as a player here at Georgia.
Yeah, and I remember Ben Cleveland telling us, Kirby Smart before a game like that's a little bit different. And, in the Tennessee, they used to like to run the highlight on their big Jumbotron of Jamal Lewis running over Kirby as a player. And Kirby Smart has taken note of that as well. And I don't know if that's going to be in their pregame highlights. If I were Heupel, I'd probably say, hey, how about Ixnay, the Martse highlight with Jamal Lewis. Let's not do anything. And I'll share this with you too. I mentioned Dan Lanning. You saw that Oregon beat Texas A&M, beat Oklahoma State 69-3. And I sent Lanning a message and said, Mike Gundy probably shouldn't have been talking, and Lanning, he's figured that out. So these coaches these are human beings at the end of the day. Kirby Smart does not like orange. He'll never say that it's any different than any other game, but my observations covering this program is that Kirby Smart does not like Tennessee orange, and this game is of particular importance to him. He never beat the Vols as a player.
And the dog people don't like orange either. That's why it's going to make Saturday so much fun up there. As we get ready for Saturday, we're going to be live on the Riverboat pregame. Want to urge you to join us for that. Brandon Adams will be pregame. We also Kaylee Mansell doing her normal DawgNation game day show as well. We'll have full coverage of there. We'll get our boots on the ground there at Neyland Stadium, get what we get, and then also have the post-game show with Brandon Adams as well. So we'll be wrapping it all up, and we'll be back here next week talking about it. Hopefully a Georgia win. We'll see if they can knock off the Vols and keep moving down the tracks. It'll be a bye week and then Alabama, so it's only getting bigger and bigger from here.
Yeah, it's exciting. Everything's still out in front of Georgia. It's a young team. Kirby's done what he can to prepare them, and now they're going to put it to the test in Neyland Stadium in front of 100,000 people, and Tennessee and their new transfer quarterback. We'll find out who's real and what's what.
We'll see if he gets us welcome to the SEC moment coming up on Saturday. That's going to do it for On the Beat this week, presented by Ingles. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.